start that. Thank you, David. Before I start, I'd just like to remind you of something that went on yesterday around this time, and that was Peter Reeve running through a list of the councillors that we've had elected. Well, I have some very good news. We've had a new name to add to that list, and that is my daughter. 7-year-old Jennifer was yesterday elected to her school council. I don't think she stood entirely on a UKIP platform, because she was advocating more public spending. At least that is buying new books for the reception classes where their books are tattered and torn. So,
all right too.
And another note of caution, I fear that having achieved 62% of the vote, she has set rather a high bar for me to balance. But it proves the Webbs can win in London. I'm delighted to have won the party's nomination to be UKIP's mayoral candidate in the 2012 elections next year. And I'd like to thank all those that supported and indeed voted for me. It is also extremely encouraging that we had, it's 6 people though, not 5, vying to be our mayoral candidate. And we'd like to thank them all. As I said, they've said it was a clean fight. At no time were there any reports of punching, biting or gouging. Quite unusual in a UKIP contest. There is a wealth of talent amongst my fellow candidates, and I hope that you will join me and put all your efforts into getting elected representation in London in 2012. We must now get on with the task of setting out my and UKIP's vision for London, which is one that I believe will resonate with the ordinary folk of London. That said, it is not going to be an easy fight. It is going to be a rematch of Boris and Ken. Last time they met, everybody got squeezed, including the increasingly irrelevant Liberal Democrats, who lost 2 seats on the Assembly. But I believe Londoners are crying out for change, especially in the light of the recent London riots and the less than helpful comments of both Boris and Ken Livingstone. But I have to say, I'm not entirely sure if Boris is on the side of law and order or in fact on the side of the rioters. Let's face it, he's on rather thin ice when it comes to criticising those who recently went on the rampage, smashing shop windows, as he himself and his mate Dave, whilst at Oxford, belonged to the Bullingdon Club, which had a reputation for doing just that. With the ongoing Euro debt crisis and the negative impact of EU legislation on London jobs, there has never been a better time for UKIP. One of the critical issues in this election is going to be about jobs in London. As many of you know, at the end of last year, Conservatives and Labour MEPs voted through legislation that is going to have a huge impact on the way the city operates and will result in many financial service jobs moving overseas. But also, it will be those people in the support industries of the financial services that will also lose their jobs. Only UKIP can defend the city. But it's not just city jobs that are under threat. Next year, Boris is due to expand the scope of the low emission zone, something first introduced by Ken. This will have a devastating impact on small businesses, charities and the self-employed around London. Many small charities will simply not be able to afford new or retrofit existing vehicles with filters. Already the St John's Ambulance Service has had to scrap 8 ambulances and find the money to modify 32 others. And the list goes on. This affects many, many industries, particularly those with specialist vehicles, the recovery, and as you know, the ice cream industry. And this could result in ice cream vans no longer being on the streets of London. And the sad part is, the filters don't work in an urban environment. Only UKIP will speak up for small business. But be warned, it is not just London that is affected with the low emission zones. They are being considered up and down the country, with some 30 towns and cities considering bringing them in. Like so much EU-directed legislation, it is ill thought out and is implemented regardless of the negative impact it will have on British jobs and the overall increase in cost to business. Even London Transport Transport for London's own research says that most LEZ schemes would have a modest reduction in emissions and improvement in air quality. And subsequent studies have actually shown that these filters have led to an increase in the more harmful NOx levels. Whilst we all want cleaner air, forcing ordinary hard-working people off the road is not the answer. It is not vehicles per se that pollute, but rather the people driving them. And until we tackle the problem of mass, uncontrolled immigration, we are not going to achieve any of these arbitrary air quality targets. Whilst I will fight to win, it is important to remember that as well as voting for a London mayor, we will also be voting in London for people to sit on the London Assembly. And come what may, it is vital that we have an independent voice on that Assembly to hold the eventual winner to account. With your help, and perhaps more importantly, your money, we can win in London. Thank you.